Good evening, and welcome back to the Sleepy Story. Before tonight's gentle tale begins, take a quiet moment to settle in wherever you are. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below. It's always soothing to see our little nighttime community around the world. Now, let your breathing slow. Release the day, soften your thoughts, and simply listen. There's nothing you need to do. Just relax, get comfortable, and allow this calm story to guide you gently, peacefully, towards sleep. The Monkey's Heart. East Africa, a flighty little monkey proved that he could think fast when his life was at stake. At the edge of the sea, there grew a huge tree which spread half its branches over the land and the other half over the water. It was the favorite tree of a little monkey who would swing and play among its branches all day, stopping only when he was hungry to pick and eat some of the delicious fruit which grew there. Now, in the sea, there lived a shark. One day, the monkey threw fruit into the water, and the shark gobbled it up. It was very tasty, and the shark began to swim close to the tree every morning until he made friends with the monkey. And persuaded him to throw fruit down for him every day. "Thank you, friend monkey," the shark would say. "I get so tired of eating nothing but fish all the time. This fruit is delicious." The monkey enjoyed the shark's friendship, and he also enjoyed throwing the fruit into the sea, aiming it at different patches of water. As a child throws stones at the waves rolling up the beach, one day the shark looked up at the monkey as he swung among the branches of the huge tree and said, "You have been very kind to me these last few months, providing me with fruit every day, and I should like to do some thing for you in return." The monkey chewed his fingers and looked down with interest at the shark, but said nothing. "So I have decided to take you and show you my home," continued the shark. "Then you will meet the other members of my tribe, and they will be able to thank you for your kindness." Tomes. The monkey looked doubtful and replied after a moment's thought, "I don't think I want to go, thank you. We land animals are not fond of getting our fur wet, and as you know, I cannot swim. I shall be much happier if I stay in my tree." "Come now," said the shark. "Who said you would get wet? I shall carry you to my home on my back, and not a drop of water will touch you, for I shall swim very carefully without splashing my tail about." The monkey was still undecided, but the day was hot, and the fruit season was almost over. Thinking it would be cooler on the water, and that there might be something good to eat at the end of the journey, the monkey at last agreed to go. He climbed down the tree leaped onto the shark's back, and they were off. At first, the monkey was more frightened than he had expected to be, since it was not easy to cling to the shark's slip. Parry back, and they seemed to be traveling so swiftly through the deep blue water. But presently, he got used to the movement and opened his eyes wide at the sight of the fish and plants he could see below. "Are you enjoying yourself?" called the shark. "Don't you find it much cooler here than on dry land?" "Yes," replied the monkey, "but I wish your back wasn't so slippery." "How much farther have we to go?" "We're just about halfway," answered the shark. "And there is something that I think I ought to tell you. The chief of our tribe, the biggest and most powerful shark in the sea, is very ill, and we fear he will die. But our medicine man told us that if the chief can be given a monkey's heart to eat, he will recover. Therefore, I am taking you to him, but because you have always been kind to me, I thought I would prepare you for what lies ahead." The monkey was terrified and bit his lips to stop himself crying out with fear, while he thought of a plan to help him escape. At last he said as calmly as he could, "But how foolish of you not to have told me this before we left the land. How can I give my heart to the chief when I have not brought it with me?" "You have not brought it with you?" repeated the shark. "But what else could you do with it?" "It's obvious that you don't know much about monkeys, or you would have heard that most of us leave our hearts hanging in the tree where we sleep. We only use them at night time," replied the monkey. Then he sighed, "But I don't suppose you'll believe me. You'd better go on swimming until we reach your home, and then, when you have killed me, how angry your chief will be when he finds I have no heart." The shark knew only too well how angry the rest of his tribe would be if what the monkey said was true. "As I said before," remarked the monkey, "if you had only told me that you needed my heart, I would have brought it with me. I would have been only too happy to let your chief eat it, since you are such a great friend of mine." So the shark turned in the water and swam toward the land, saying, "If I take you back to your tree, will you go and get your heart?" "Of course I will," replied the monkey. "Let us make haste, so that we do not keep your chief waiting." The shark streaked through the sea like an arrow with the monkey on his back, who scarcely dared to believe his good luck. At last they reached the shore, and the monkey leaped on to the land and shot up the tree, calling, "Wait for me, I shan't be long. I know exactly where I dutates." Then there was silence. The shark floated backward and forward in the water below, waiting for the monkey. But not a sound did he hear from the tree above, nor did he see the slightest movement among the leaves. Presently he called, "Monkey, monkey, have you got your heart yet?" but there was no reply. Thinking that the monkey had left his heart in a tree further inland, the shark waited a little longer, but still everything was silent. At last, the shark became angry and impatient and shouted loudly, "Monkey, monkey, how much longer are you going to keep me waiting?" A half-rotten fruit landed with a thud on the shark's nose, and a burst of laughter came from among the branches of the tree. "What sort of a fool do you think I am?" asked the voice of the monkey. "Did you really expect me to come back with you to your home to be killed?" "But you said you would fetch your heart," complained the shark. "Can you not find it?" The monkey laughed louder than ever. "My heart is in the right place, in the center of my body," he shouted. "What's more, it has been there all the time. Now go away. Our friendship is ended. You may find some other monkey foolish enough to go with you. But," he added, emphasizing each word by hitting the shark on the nose with a shriv eled fruit, "you won't get me." So the shark swam sadly away. But the monkey laughed and chattered in the tree, calling all his friends together, telling them how he had outwitted the shark, and warning them against being persuaded to take a sea voyage if they wanted to live to a good old age. The Princess of the Mountain. India. What could the prince do when his bride's most vital possession was stolen? Once upon a time, there lived a Raja and a Rani who had only one daughter. She was the most beautiful princess in the world. Her eyes were bright as stars, and her face as fair as a flower. She was called Sarika Bai. At her birth, all the wise men in the kingdom consulted the stars, and from them read her future. They then told her par ence that this would be made up of joy and sorrow. They also foretold that she would grow up both good and beautiful, and that she would marry a prince. More they could not say, and they left the court with rich presents given to them by the Raja. One strange thing was noticed about the princess when she was born. Round her neck hung a chain of gold, and when her parents asked the wise men about the chain, one, the oldest, said, "This chain holds the soul of the princess. If it is taken off and worn by another, Sarika Bai will die. Guard it with great care." On hearing this, the Raja sent at once for the royal goldsmith and ordered him to fasten the chain more securely round the neck of the princess. And as soon as she was old enough, she was told why she must never take it off. When the princess was 14 years old, her beauty was so great that the fame of it spread right across the land. Many princes and nobles came to her father's court to ask her hand in marriage. But to all of them, she said no. And her parents did not force her choice, because they had promised her that she should follow her own heart when the time came for her to choose a husband. On her birthday, the Raja gave her a pair of slippers made of gold and set with diamonds and other precious stones. In the whole world, there was no other pair like them, and they were so small that only Sarika Bai could wear them. She prized them highly, even more than the golden chain which held her soul. Indeed, she never thought about it, nor remembered that if she took it off and another wore it, she would die. But whenever she went out walking, she put on her golden slippers, and every time she did so, she would say, "Look, look, aren't my golden slippers pretty? See how the diamonds sparkle, how the rubies flash, and the emeralds glitter like green fire." But one day, one most unlucky day, when she was out with her ladies, gathering flowers on the mountainside, she slipped, and one of the precious shoes fell off and went down over the rocks to the jungle below. When she found out what had happened, Sarika Bai began to weep and could not be comforted. There she sat among the flowers, one shoe off and one shoe on, the tears rolling down her lovely face. In vain the Raja told her he would give her another pair far more beautiful. In vain his servants hunted all the rest of the day for the lost slipper. In vain criers went through the city to announce that whoever returned the slipper would gain a splendid reward. But it did not come back. It had disappeared. Sometime afterward, a young prince, the son of a Raja who lived in the plains, was out hunting and found the slipper in the jungle. He took it home and showed it to the Rani, his mother, saying, "Only a fairy's foot could fit this little shoe. Only a princess could possess one so valuable," replied the Rani. "Now, my son, if you could find the owner of the slipper and win her for your bride, how happy we should be." "And how happy I should be too," said the prince. "But how shall I ever find her?" "We will send word to all the cities and villages in the kingdom to say that a golden slipper has been found in the jungle. In this way, we may learn to whom it belongs." And this they did, but no lovely princess claimed the shoe, and the prince longed in vain to find its owner. But one day, some travelers came to the court of the Raja of the Plains. They told a strange story of how a princess, the only daughter of the rich and powerful Raja of the mountains, had lost her golden slipper, and it was said her father would pay a great reward to anyone who returned it. The prince said nothing until he was alone with his mother. Then, from the front of his robe, he drew forth the golden slipper. "But I am going on a journey," he said, his eyes bright with hope. "I am going to see the princess of the mountains and give her back this little shoe." "Listen, my son," replied his mother. "This Raja is proud and wealthy. He will offer you a great quantity of money, but take neither silver nor gold. Say boldly that you claim the princess herself in return for the golden slipper." So the prince rode away, the slipper safely hidden against his heart. For many days he journeyed across sandy plains and through dark forests, then up the steep mountain ghat, which led to the palace of Sarika Bai's father. Boldly he stated his errand. Boldly he drew forth the slipper and knelt before the Raja to restore it. "And what reward do you ask for my daughter's shoe?" asked the Raja. Then he added, "You make your choice. Silver and gold you may have, or horses from my stable." "To want none of these things," replied the prince quietly. "Come, state your price," said the Raja. "My price is the princess herself," replied the young man. "You have asked for something I cannot give you," said the Raja. "The princess has long held the right to choose her own husband." "Maharaj," said the prince, "may I ask your daughter if she will choose me?" The Raja was troubled. He liked the handsome young prince well enough, but the marriage would not bring him greater power or honor. He hoped in his heart that the princess would have nothing to say to the son of the Raja of the plains. But Sarika Bai had been peeping from her window as the prince rode up, and she saw that he was just the bridegroom she had dreamed of. So when her father put the matter to her, instead of refusing to marry a poor prince of the plains, she said, "Very well, I'll have him, as it seems to be the only way to get back my little golden shoe." The wedding took place amid great rejoicings. Sarika Bai looked more beautiful than the moon, and all the princes and nobles who had hoped to marry her were quite annoyed, saying, "Who is this fellow from the plains? He came with no escort, riding alone as if he'd been just a sowar. He isn't very handsome either. What does Sarika Bai see in him?" But all the same, they remained for the wedding feast, which went on for almost a week and cost the Raja of the mountains almost as much as Sarika's golden slippers. At the end of the celebrations, the prince came to the Raja and said, "I now wish to take my wife to my own country." "That is how it should be," agreed the Raja with a sigh. "Guard Sarika Bai well, but above all, see that no one else ever wears the chain which hangs around her neck. For if she takes it off and someone else puts it on, in that moment, your wife will die." The prince promised to take great care both of Sarika Bai and her golden chain, and they set off to the bridegroom's country. the Raja himself rode out part of the way with them and gave them splendid presents of jewels, money, elephants, camels, horses, rich robes, carpets, and rugs. In fact, everything they could desire. Then he and his company said farewell, and the prince, with his lovely Sarika Bai, continued his journey to the plains. The old Raja and Rani were delighted with their new daughter-in-law, and she was at once happy with them. But in the general rejoicing, they had forgotten one person. As was the custom of the country, the prince had been married before, and Sarika Bai was not his first wife. She was the one the prince loved, and the one his parents welcomed. The other one he had married when he was only a little boy, long before he had found Sarika Bai's golden slipper. His first wife was a sulky, jealous creature, and although Sarika Bai, knowing the story, treated this Maina Bai as if she were indeed a sister, Maina hated the lovely new bride and plotted to do her harm. Then the Rani of the plains said to Sarika Bai, "Dear child, keep away from Maina Bai. She is angry because you have taken her place with the prince. I fear she may do you harm." But Sarika Bai only laughed as she replied, "I am not afraid," went away, "of Maina Bai. It is natural that she should resent my coming here, but in time, if I am kind to her, she will come to love me, if only a little." The old Rani sighed. "I wish I could think so," she said, as she. Soon afterward, the prince had to go on a long journey and leave Sarika Bai with his parents, who promised him to watch over her. But no sooner had the prince ridden away than the first wife began to plot against her rival. At first, she showed Sarika Bai many little attentions. "We are both lonely," she said one day. "Why not spend some of your time with me?" And Sarika Bai would join her almost every warm evening, taking her jewels and other pretty things to show her co-wife, and treating her as if she were a loved sister. Once, she let Maina Bai try to put on the little golden slippers, but they were far too small. This made the jealous woman very angry, and the old Rani, hearing the jangle of her voice, asked what was the matter. She was told that Maina Bai was annoyed because she had fewer jewels than the new wife. And so, again, the old Rani warned Sarika Bai. "Do not trust her," she said. But the girl only replied, "Ah, poor thing, she so much wanted the golden slippers." One day, when the two wives were sitting together, Maina Bai asked suddenly, "Why do you always wear that golden chain round your neck, Sarika Bai?" "Because it contains my soul," replied Sarika Bai simply. "I must wear it, for if I took it off and another put it on, I should die." "Die!" exclaimed Maina Bai, as if she were horrified. Oh, do be careful, Sarika dear. I hope you have fastened it on securely. Teat is riveted, said Sarika Bai, but it would slip over my head, I suppose. But I shall not lose it that way, Mina, for I am so happy to be alive, you know. Of course you are, agreed Mina Bai, but in her heart a wicked thought came suddenly. If Sarika Bai died, the prince might love me once again. That night, she bribed one of her servants to go to the room where Sarika Bai was sleeping. And this the woman did, stealing the chain and slipping it round her own neck. At that moment, the soul of Sarika Bai fled, and she lay as if dead, without breathing. In the morning, when her servants came, they tried in vain to wake her. Then they ran screaming to the old Rani, who hurried to the side of the lifeless girl. They did all they could to bring her back to life, but she lay still as death, though her cheeks were fresh and blooming, and a happy smile played round her lips. Alas, alas, mourned the old Rani, and all the maidens wept for sorrow that one so sweet and lovely would never speak to them again. But no one missed the golden chain or thought that it might have been stolen. All they spoke of was the prince. Who would tell him? What would he do when he learned of the terrible thing that had happened? The old Raja and the old Rani talked for a long time together of how to break the sad news. Never to see his young wife again in all her beauty, wept the old Rani. Never to hear her voice in welcome. Faye shall see her, even if she cannot welcome him, said the old Raja. We will build her a crystal casket, and there she shall rest, as if only asleep. In this way, our son will always remember her. So they chose a quiet place in the forest, near a clear pool, and here they placed the crystal casket. Inside lay Sarika Bai, looking as if she were only sleeping, and they gazed their last on her, then went away, saying that only the eyes of her husband should ever rest on her now. But a strange thing happened. In the dead of night, the wicked servant who had stolen Sarika Bai's golden chain and let her soul escape took off the chain. Then Sarika Bai came to life and wondered where she was. All round her spread the forest. Outside the crystal casket, a bright moon lit up the lonely scene. Nearby, a jackal howled, and a startled bird called from a tree above. JT, am dreaming, thought the poor girl. Dreaming I am lost, and the prince cannot find me. And she tried to pray. Far away, the wicked servant, too, awoke from a terrible dream, and got up to put on the golden chain. Again, the soul of Sarika Bai left her. She heard no more of the forest sounds around her, nor had she any memory left. And this went on for many days and many nights. Then the prince came home. When he heard what had happened to his young wife, he was like a man who has lost his reason. He raved and shrieked, calling upon Sarika Bai to come back to him, or he too would die. Mina Bai came and prostrated herself before him, but he shrank back from her as if she were a poisonous snake. At last they told him of the crystal casket which they had placed in the forest. Without a word, he hurried away. The sun was hot in the palace gardens, but in the forest it was dim and cool. His feet made no sound on the soft grass. All was silent around the crystal casket where his wife lay, like some beautiful statue, a smile on her calm face, kneeling beside the precious tomb. The prince got at Sarika Bai. Then all the days they had passed together followed each other in a joyful procession through his mind. How could she be dead, his princess of the mountains, his lovely lady of the little golden slippers? All day he remained beside her, and not a leaf stirred. No bird sang. Daylight faded. The moon rose, and they came from the palace to take him away. But even as he left, the soul of Sarika Bai came back, and she was alive. The sound of flowing water reached her ears. She arose and left the casket, seeking the pool. There, under the spring which fed it, she made a cup of her 2 hands and drank from them. During the night, a child was born to her, a son, and she rejoiced greatly. But with the dawn, her soul left her, and only the child wept against her silent heart. That day, the prince did not return to the forest. Worn out by sorrow, he lay sleeping in the palace. But as the moon rose, a great wish to see his wife again caused him to go to the forest. Then he heard a faint cry and saw Sarika Bai leave the casket, carrying a child in her arms, and go down to the water's edge. For a moment, he was unable to speak or move. So great was his amazement, so terrible his joy. Then he followed her and watched her bathe her face and drink from the cup of her hands. The child lay on the bank of the pool, its timid cry like the sound of some tiny, wild creature. The mother caught it to her bosom and comforted it. But as she turned, she saw her husband. For a moment, a silence held them. Then Sarika Bai offered him the child. The prince sprang toward her and caught her with the child to his heart. This, then, was real. Sarika Bai lived. The rest had been a fearful dream. Later, she told him what had happened, for now she knew that the loss of the chain brought daily death. she had no idea who had robbed her. Her first waking had been inside the crystal tomb. The night passed all too quickly, but as the sun rose, the wicked woman put on the golden chain. Sarika Bai's eyes closed, and she lay as if dead. The prince rushed back to the palace and demanded that every person in it should at once appear before him. First came the servants of the old Raja and Rani. They had nothing to fear and went on their way. Then came the maidens of Sarika Bai, weeping for their dear mistress. They too passed on. The prince had nothing but kind looks for them. The first wife sent a message to say that she was sick and unable to obey his command. But the prince insisted that she and all her servants should pass before him, as the rest had done. "Take off the necklace," whispered Mina Bai to her servant. "And bring Sarika Bai back to life," whispered the woman in a panic. "Then hide it deep under your sari," said her mistress, "and hurry past the prince with your eyes cast down upon the ground." She herself went slowly, proudly, her throat lightly veiled by the thin gauze of her scarf. The prince hardly looked at her. His eyes were turned upon her woman, who followed. "Stop," he cried. "Hold her, guards, and tear open the folds of her sari." And there shone the necklace, the chain of gold in which lay the soul of Sarika Bai. "There is no punishment too great for you," said the prince as he tore the chain away from the wicked woman's neck. "Take her away," he said to the guards, "and seize her mistress also. Later, I will say what is to be done with them." The palace was in an uproar as the two wretched women were dragged away. But the prince heard none of it. He was on his way to the forest, carrying the chain, which would restore Sarika Bai back to life. "Come back, Sarika Bai, come back," he cried as he placed it round her neck. Then she opened her eyes and, smiling, caught the child to her and comforted it. Soon came the old Raja and the Rani, weeping tears of joy, and Sarika Bai placed the boy in the arms of the Rani and bent her head to receive the blessings of her husband's parents. The baby, strong and beautiful, reached out a hand and caught at the shining thing which hung round his mother's neck. "No, no, my son," said the prince, "though all the world may be yours someday, the soul of Sarika Bai remains her own." Schippeitaro, Japan. "Tell it not to Schippeitaro," chanted the demon cats at their midnight gathering. Long, long ago, in the days of fairies and giants, ogres and dragons, valiant knights and distressed damsels, in those good old days, a brave young warrior went out into the wide world in search of adventures. For some time, he went without meeting with anything out of the common. But at length, after journeying through a thick forest, he found himself, one evening, on a wild and lonely mountainside. No village was in sight, no cottage, not even the hut of a charcoal burner, so often to be found on the outskirts of the forest. He had been following a faint and much overgrown path, but at length even that was lost sight of. Twilight was coming on, and in vain he strove to recover the lost track. Each effort seemed only to entangle him more hopelessly in the briars and tall grasses which grew thickly on all sides. Faint and weary, he stumbled on in the fast-gathering darkness, until suddenly he came upon a little temple, deserted and half-ruined, but which still contained a shrine. Here, at least, was shelter from the chilly dews, and here he resolved to pass the night. Food he had none, but wrapped in his mantle, and with his good sword by his side, he lay down, and was soon fast asleep. Toward midnight, he was awakened by a dreadful noise. At first, he thought it must be a dream, but the noise continued, the whole place resounding with the most terrible shrieks and yells. The young warrior raised himself cautiously, and seizing his sword, looked through a hole in the ruined wall. He beheld a strange and awful sight. A troop of hideous cats were engaged in a wild and horrible dance, their yells echoing through the night. Mingled with their unearthly cries, the young warrior could clearly distinguish the words, "Tell it not to Schippeitaro. Listen for his bark. Tell it not to Schippeitaro. Keep it close and dark." A beautiful, clear, full moon shed its light upon this gruesome scene, which the young warrior watched with amazement and horror. Suddenly, the midnight hour being past, the phantom cats disappeared, and all was silence once more. The rest of the night passed undisturbed, and the young warrior slept soundly until morning. When he awoke, the sun was already up, and he hastened to leave the scene of last night's adventure. By the bright morning light, he presently discovered traces of a path which the evening before had been invisible. This he followed, and found to his great joy that it led toward an open plain. There he saw one or two scattered cottages, and a little farther on, a village. Pressed by hunger, he was making the best of his way toward the village, when he heard the tones of a woman's voice, loud in lamentation and entreaty. No sooner did these sounds of distress reach the warrior's ears than his hunger was forgotten, and he hurried on to the nearest cottage to find out what was the matter, and if he could give any help. The people listened to his questions, and shaking their heads sorrowfully, told him that all help was vain. "Every year," said they, "the mountain spirit claims a victim. The time has come, and this very night will he devour our loveliest maiden. This is the cause of the wailing and lamentation." And when the young warrior, filled with wonder, inquired further, they told him that at sunset the victim would be put into a sort of cage, carried to that very ruined temple where he had passed the night, and there left alone. In the morning, she would have vanished. So it was each year, and so it would be now. There was no help for it. As he listened, the young warrior was filled with an earnest desire to rescue the maiden. And the mention of the ruined shrine having brought back to his mind the adventure of the night before, he asked the people whether they had ever heard the name of Schippeitaro, and who and what he was. "Schippeitaro is a strong and beautiful dog," was the reply. "He belongs to the head man of our prince, who lives only a little way from here. We often see him following his master. He is a fine, brave fellow." The young knight did not stop to ask more questions, but hurried off to Schippeitaro's master and begged him to lend his dog for one night. At first, the man was unwilling, but at length agreed to lend Schippeitaro on condition that he should be brought back the next day. Overjoyed, the young warrior led the dog away. Next, he went to see the parents of the unhappy maiden, and told them to keep her in the house and watch her carefully until his return. He then placed the dog Schippeitaro in the cage which had been prepared for the maiden, and, with the help of some of the young men of the village, carried it to the ruined temple, and there set it down. The young men refused to stay one moment on that haunted spot, but hurried down the mountain, as if the whole troop of hobgoblins had been at their heels. The young warrior, with no companion but the dog, remained to see what would happen. At midnight, when the full moon was high in the heavens and shed her light over the mountain, came the phantom cats once more. This time, they had in their midst a huge black tomcat, fiercer and more terrible than all the rest, which the young warrior had no difficulty in knowing as the frightful mountain fiend himself. No sooner did the monster catch sight of the cage than he danced and sprang round it, with yells of triumph and hideous joy, followed by his companions. When he had jeered at and taunted his victim long enough, he threw open the door of the cage. But this time he met his match. The brave Schippeitaro sprang upon him, and seizing him with his teeth, held him fast, while the young warrior, with one stroke of his good sword, laid the monster dead at his feet. As for the other cats, too much astonished to fly, they stood gazing at the dead body of their leader, and were made short work of by the night and ship Schippeitaro. The young warrior brought back the brave dog to his master with 1,000 thanks, told the father and mother of the maiden that their daughter was free, and the people of the village that the fiend had claimed his last victim and would trouble them no more. "You owe all this to the brave Schippeitaro," he said, as he bade them farewell and went his way in search of fresh adventures. The Maid in the Mirror. "China, you will see my poor self in the face of this mirror," said the lovely Feng Xian to the lazy scholar. "I shall never learn to make word pictures so well as you, Lao Lao." Ah Sheng sighed as he watched his grandmother's hand moving over the strip of thin, white rice straw paper which lay on the table before her. "Ah yes, small bear, you will perhaps write even better if you work well with Scholar Shi in the court of learning," the old woman replied. "And Yu Lang also must soon begin to learn how to hold the hairpen. Even though she is a girl, I intend that she shall be taught to read and to write, just as I was. Others may be satisfied with teaching their girl children to keep house, to embroider, and to play on the lute. But a dull needle will not go through cloth half so swiftly as a bright one, and Yu Lang, as well as her brothers, needs to sharpen her wits." The old one was noted for her skill with the 4 gems of the library, as she called her paper, and her rabbit hair brush, her inkstone of carved gray stone with its little well filled with water, and her sweet-smelling ink stick of dried lamp black and pine oil. She knew how to dip her ink stick in the water just long enough for it to make a smooth black paste when she rubbed it on the little ink slab. Years of practicing with the brush had given her great skill in making the delicate strokes of the word pictures, which the Chinese use in their writing. "You should have seen my father use the hairpen," Lao Lao said to the children who stood beside her table, watching her make one stroke upward, another downward, a third straight across. He could copy the writing of the best scholars in the empire so neatly that you could not tell one from the other. To keep his brush hand firm and limber when he was not writing, he often held in it 2 walnuts, which he kept moving around and around. I can remember their clicking noise now as they rubbed against one another. Sometimes my father allowed me to feel their smooth, polished shells, which so much rubbing had turned to the color of golden mahogany. Grandmother Ling herself enjoyed copying the finely made word pictures in the old books in her study. She copied also the paintings on silk, which were rolled up in her treasure chests. Often she made paintings out of her own mind, a rock or a mountain, a graceful stalk of bamboo, or a spray of plum blossoms. You have not been doing well lately, schoolmaster Shi tells me, Sheng, the old one said, as she dipped her brush in the fragrant ink paste. You must work better. Remember, none holds so high a as the scholar. The wealthiest man in the empire is not so important as one who has great learning. Also, learning brings riches. If you study hard enough to pass the emperor's examinations when you are older, high position and wealth will always be yours. So it was with young Lu. But of course, he had to help him, the lovely maid in the mirror. The boy and the girl both pricked up their ears at the mention of a maid in a mirror. That sounded as though there might be astery near the door of the old one's memory. But they did not dare to ask for it, so long as their grandmother's hand was moving over the paper. They knew one false motion might spoil her whole page, but they breathed sighs of relief when she laid down her brush and sat back in her chair. You would like to hear that story? Lao Lao asked, smiling at their shining eyes. Well, my fingers are cramped. The brush no longer moves, surely. I will tell the tale to you, and perhaps Sheng will remember it when things do not go well for him in our courtyard of learning. Lu was a young man who lived in days long gone by. His family were not rich, but they had determined that their son should be given as much schooling as any other youth in their city. They saved every penny in order that he might have the best teachers, and they watched each step he took along the road to the cells where the emperor's examinations were held. Now, Lu was young, and Lu sometimes was lazy. And there came a time when he did not work very hard over his books and his brushes. No matter how earnestly his father explained that once the examinations were passed, he would be given a high position, Lu was not interested. He let his books lie closed, and he spent his whole time in games with his friends, or walking with his bird under the trees along the bank of the river. One summer day, as this idle young man strolled there with his bird cage in his hand, he met a maiden who said her name was Feng Xian. She was of such shining beauty that both the sun and the moon seemed dim beside her. Feng Xian smiled shyly at Lu. They exchanged words of greeting, and straightway the young man knew that he would have her for his wife, or he would never be wed. Again and again, Feng Xian and Lu met on the riverbank, and sweet were the hours they spent talking together. But one day, when it was time for them to part, the maiden grew sore, woeful. Our meetings must end," she said to the youth. "You are wasting your days. You do not open a book. You do not lift the hairpen. The paste is dry on your inkstone. I shall not come again until you have passed your examinations. But I have brought you a present by means of which you sometimes may see me." And she handed Lou a shining mirror, just like that one that hangs over my bed. The old woman pointed to a round disc of thin white metal, which was hung up on the wall by its flat handle. There was so little glass in those days that most of the Chinese mirrors were made of polished metal instead. Lao Lao believed that this mirror helped to keep her safe from bad spirits. Often she had explained to the children that the spirits cannot bear to see their own faces. At the first glimpse of the silvery surface of the mirror, they fly away in great haste. It is because of this that Lung Er, the youngest Ling grandchild, always had a tiny glass mirror sewed upon his red cap. One could never tell when one might meet a bad spirit, and it was well to take every care to drive it away. All these things flashed through Lao Lao's mind, and she paused for a moment. Then she went on with her story again. When she put the round mirror into his hand, Feng Xian said, "My honorable friend, you will see my poor self in the face of this mirror. But you will see it there only when you have done well with your books and your writing brush." And with that, she was gone. Tu sadly turned his steps toward home. When he had shut himself in the room, which his family had given him for his study, he examined the mirror. He looked first at its back, with the graceful bamboo leaves carved deep in its metal. Then he turned it around and peered at its smooth, polished, silvery face. There, indeed, he could see the figure of the lovely Feng Xian. But the maid's back was turned, and she seemed to be moving away from him. "Only when you have done well will you see me." Lu repeated to himself the words Feng Xian had said to him, and he sat down at his table and opened his books. His parents were overjoyed at the change in their son. From dawn until dark, he worked in his study. He would not receive visitors. He no longer went forth to play games with his friends. His teachers had nothing but good to report of him. And each morning and each evening, when Lu looked in the mirror, he saw there the smiling face of Feng Xian. But summer does not last forever, my children. And in climbing a hill, the last step must be as firm as the first. In time, Lu became weary of his well-doing. He began to go about once more with his friends. His books were seldom opened. His teachers shook their gray heads. Then, one day, the young man looked in the mirror and saw the fair maid with tears on her cheeks. She turned her back and began to move away as she had done on the day when Lu had first found her in the mirror. A wave of regret swept over the youth. He felt greatly ashamed, and he hurried to open his books. Once more, he worked from dawn until dark. He hung the mirror where he could not fail to see when Feng Xian was pleased and when she was sorrowful. His love for her grew so great, and he worked so well that in just a few years he was ready to take the emperor's examinations. 3 times he went in and out of the little cells where the tests were given. 3 times he passed, and 3 times he returned in triumph to the house of his parents. What excitement there was in Lu's neighborhood when the red official notice of his final success was pasted upon his gate. Firecrackers were set off. Candles and incense burned in the hall of the ancestors so that they might know of the good fortune that had come to the family. Flags flew, and friends streamed in through the gate to congratulate the young man. Lu, dressed in a splendid new gown, rode about in a sedan chair to visit his friends. And there was a fine feast and a procession in honor of the occasion. In those early days, women strewed flowers along the way. Musicians played, and red banners tied upon leafy bamboo poles were carried before the young scholars. While the family celebration was still going on, there came a knock at the gate of Lu's house, and there was announced a go-between, who had been sent by the wealthiest man in the whole city to discuss the matter of a marriage between Lu and his daughter. Such is the power of learning, Sheng, that this man wished to bestow his fairest child and many rich gifts with her upon the son of this modest household. The young man's parents were overcome with joy at such good fortune. But to their surprise, Lu himself would not listen to the go-between's words. "I do not care how fair the young maiden may be. I will not wed her," he said to his father. And he went into his study and closed the door tight. There he turned to the mirror to seek his beloved Feng Xian. He found the maid's face wreathed in smiles, and as he looked, it seemed to him that she stepped down out of the mirror and stood close beside him. "Go back to the go-between, O youth of goodness and wisdom," the mirror maid said. "Consent to the marriage he offers. Do not ask my reason, for I may not tell it. But believe me, all will be just as you most desire." Before Lu could ask her one question, the maiden had vanished. Try as he would, he could not find even her shadow on the silvery face of the mirror. There was nothing for him to do but to follow her wishes, and to his parents' great joy, the marriage was arranged. Tu's heart was sad, for he could not yet understand why his beloved Feng Xian should wish him to marry another. And it was with downcast eyes that he met the bridal chair at the gate. However, his sorrow was soon turned to joy, my small ones, for when the bride stood before him, he found that, instead of a stranger, it was Feng Erxian herself. Never again did Lu see her face in the mirror, and never would she tell him what fairy had sent her spirit to meet him there on the river bank. As a matter of fact, he had no need to know that, and he had no need to look for her again in the mirror, since all through his life she stood by his side. High position and riches and a beautiful bride, all these came to Lu because he paid attention to his books and his brush. And such good luck may come also to you, little bear, if you work hard with Scholar Shah in our court of learning. Why the Sea Moans. Brazil. Can it be the enchanted sea serpent is still crying? Dionysia. Once upon a time, there was a little princess who lived in a magnificent royal palace. All around the palace, there was a beautiful garden, full of lovely flowers and rare shrubs and trees. The part of the garden which the princess liked most of all was a corner of it, which ran down to the sea. She was a very lonely little princess, and she loved to sit and watch the changing beauty of the sea. The name of the little princess was Dionysia, and it often seemed to her that the sea said, as it rushed against the shore, Dionysia, Dionysia. One day, when the little princess was sitting all alone by the sea, she said to herself, "Oh, I am so lonely. I do so wish that I had somebody to play with. When I ride out in the royal chariot, I see little girls who have other little boys and girls to play with them. If I have to be the royal princess and not play with other children, I do think I might have some sort of live thing to play with me." Then a most remarkable thing happened. The sea said very slowly and distinctly and over again, so there couldn't be any mistake about it. Dionysia, Dionysia. The little princess walked up close to the sea, just as close as she dared to go, without danger of getting her royal shoes and stockings wet. Straight out of the biggest wave of all, there came a sea serpent to meet her. She knew that it was a sea serpent from the pictures in her royal storybooks, even though she had never seen a sea serpent before. But somehow, this sea serpent looked different from the pictures. Instead of being a fierce monster, it looked kind and gentle and good. After that, the little princess was very much happier. The sea serpent came out of the sea to play with her every day when she was alone. If anyone else came near, Labismena would disappear into the sea, so no one but Dionysia ever saw her. The years passed rapidly, and each year the little princess grew bigger and bigger. At last she was 16 years old, and a very grown-up princess indeed. She still enjoyed her old playmate, Labismena, and they were often together on the seashore. One day, when they were walking up and down together beside the sea serpent looked at Dionysia with sad eyes and said, "I too have been growing older all these years, dear Dionysia. Now the time has come that we can no longer play together. I shall never come out of the sea to play with you any more, but I shall never forget you, and I shall always be your friend. I hope that you will never have any trouble, but if you ever should, call my name, and I will come to help you." Then the sea serpent disappeared into the sea. About this time, the wife of a neighboring king died, and as she lay upon her deathbed, she gave the king a jeweled ring. "When the time comes when you wish to wed again," she said, "I ask you to marry a princess, upon whose finger this ring shall be neither too tight nor too loose." After a while, the king began to look about for a princess to be his bride. He visited many royal palaces and tried the ring upon the finger of many royal princesses. Upon some, the ring was too tight, and upon others, it was too loose. There was no princess whose finger it fitted perfectly. At last, in his search, the king came to the royal palace where the Princess Dionysia lived. The princess had dreams of her own, of a young and charming prince who would someday come to wed her, so she was not pleased at all. The king was old and no longer handsome, and when he tried the ring upon Dionysia's finger, she hoped with all her heart that it would not fit. It fitted perfectly. The Princess Dionysia was frightened nearly to death. "Will I really have to marry him?" she asked her royal father. Her father told her what a very wealthy king he was, with a great kingdom and a wonderful royal palace, ever so much more wonderful and grand than the palace the Princess Dionysia had always had for her home. Her father had no patience at all with her for not being happy about it. "You ought to consider yourself the most fortunate princess in all the world," he said. Dionysia spent her days and nights weeping. Her father was afraid that she would grow so thin that the ring would no longer fit her finger, so he hastened the plans for the wedding. One day, Dionysia walked up and down beside the sea, crying as if her heart would break. All at once, she stopped crying. "How stupid I have been," she said. "My old playmate, Labismena, told me that if ever I was in trouble, she would come back and help me. With all my silly crying, I had forgotten about it." Dionysia walked up close to the sea and called softly, "Labis, mena, labis mena." Out of the sea came the sea serpent, just as she used to come. The princess told the sea serpent all about the dreadful trouble which was threatening to spoil her life. "Have no fear," said Labismena. "Tell your father that you will marry the king when the king presents you with a dress the color of the fields and all their flowers, and that you will not marry him until he gives it to you." Then the sea serpent disappeared again into the sea. Dionysia sent word through her father to her royal suitor that she would wed him only when he procured her a dress the color of the fields and all their flowers. The king was very much in love with Dionysia, so he was secretly filled with joy at this request. He searched everywhere for a dress the color of the fields and all their flowers. It was a very difficult thing to find, but at last he procured one. He sent it to Dionysia at once. When Dionysia saw that the king had really found the dress for her, she was filled with grief. She thought that there was no escape, and that she would have to marry the king after all. As soon as she could get away from the palace without being noticed, she ran down to the sea and again called, "Labismena, Labismena." The sea serpent at once came out of the sea. "Do not fear," she said to Dionysia. "Go back and say that you will not wed the king until he gives you a dress the color of the sea and all its fishes." When the king heard this new request of Dionysia's, he was rather discouraged. However, he searched for the dress, and at last, after expending a great sum of money, he procured such a gown. When Dionysia saw that a dress the color of the sea and all its fishes had been found for her, she again went to seek counsel from her old playmate. "Do not be afraid," Labismena again said to her. "This time you must ask the king to get you a dress the color of the sky and all its stars. You may also tell him that this is the last present you will ask him to make you." When the king heard about the demand for a dress the color of the sky and all its stars, he was completely disheartened. But when he heard that Dionysia had promised that this would be the last present she would ask, he decided that it might be a good investment after all. He set out to procure the dress with all possible speed. At last, he found one. When Dionysia saw the dress the color of the sky and all its stars, she thought that this time there was no escape from marrying the king. She called the sea serpent with an anxious heart, for she was afraid that now even Labismena could do nothing to help her. Labismena came out of the sea in answer to her call. "Go home to the palace and get your dress the color of the fields and all their flowers," said the sea serpent. "And your dress the color of the sea and all its fishes, and your dress, the color of the sky and all its stars. Then hurry back here to the sea, for I have been preparing a surprise for you." All the time the king had been procuring the wonderful gowns for Dionysia, the sea serpent had been building a ship for her. When Dionysia returned from the royal palace with her lovely dresses, all carefully packed in a box, there was a queer little boat awaiting her. It was not at all like any other boat she had ever seen, and she was almost afraid to get into it when Labismena asked her to try it. "This little ship, which I have built for you," said Labismena, "will carry you far away over the sea to the kingdom of a prince who is the most charming prince in all the world. When you see him, you will want to marry him above all others." "Oh, Labismena, how can I ever thank you for all you have done for me?" cried Dionysia. "You can do the greatest thing in the world for me," said Labismena, "though I have never told you, and I do not believe that you have ever suspected it. I am really an enchanted princess. I shall have to remain in the form of a sea serpent until the happiest maiden in all the world, at the hour of her greatest happiness, calls my name 3 times. You will be the very happiest girl in all the world on the day of your marriage. And if you will remember to call my name 3 times, then you will break my enchantment, and I shall once more be a lovely princess instead of a sea serpent." Dionysia promised her friend that she would remember to do this. The sea serpent asked her to promise 3 times to make sure. When Dionysia had promised 3 times, and again embraced her old playmate, and thanked her for all that she had done, she sailed away in the little ship. The sea serpent disappeared into the sea. Dionysia sailed and sailed in the little ship, and at last it bore her to a lovely island. She thought that she had reached her destination, so she stepped out of the boat, not forgetting to take her box of dresses with her. As soon as she was out of the boat, it sailed away. "Now, what shall I ever do?" said Dionysia. "The ship has gone away and left me, and how shall I ever earn my living? I have never done anything useful in all my life." Dionysia surely had to do something to earn her living immediately, so she at once set out to see what she could find to do. She went from house to house, asking for food and work. At last she came to the royal palace. Here at the royal palace, they told her that they had great need of a maid to take care of the hens. Dionysia thought that this was something which she could do, so she accepted the position at once. It was, of course, very different work from being a princess in a royal palace, but it provided her with food and shelter. And when Dionysia thought of having to marry the old king, she was never sorry that she had left home. Time passed, and at last there was a great feast day celebrated in the city. Everybody in the palace went except the little maid, who minded the hens. After everybody had gone away, Dionysia decided that she would go to the festa too. She combed her hair and put on her gown, which was the color of the fields and all their flowers. In this wonderful gown, she was sure nobody would ever guess that she was the little maid who had been left at home to mind the hens. She did want to go to the festa. She hurried there as fast as she could and arrived just in time for the dances. Everybody at the festa noticed the beautiful maiden in her gown, the color of the fields, and all their flowers. The prince fell madly in love with her. Nobody had ever seen her before, and nobody could find out who the beautiful stranger was or where she came from. Before the festa was over, Dionysia slipped away, and when the rest of the royal household returned home, there was the little maid minding the hens just as they had left her. The second day of the festa, everybody went early except the little maid who looked after the hens. When the others had gone, she put on her dress the color of the sea and all its fishes, and went to the festa. She attracted even more attention than she had the day before. When the festa was over, and the royal household had returned to the royal palace, the prince remarked to his mother, "Don't you think that the beautiful stranger at the festa looks like the little maid who minds our hens?" "What nonsense," replied his mother. "How could the little maid who minds our hens ever get such wonderful gowns to wear?" Just to make sure, however, the prince told the royal counselor to find out if the little maid who minds the royal hens had been to the festa. All the servants told about leaving her at home with the hens and coming back and finding her just as they had left her. "Whoever the beautiful stranger at the festa may be," said the prince, "she is the one above all others whom I want for my wife. I shall find her some way." The third day of the festa, Dionysia went attired in her gown, the color of the sky, and all its stars. The prince fell more madly in love with her than ever. He could not get her to tell him who she was or where she lived, but he gave her a beautiful jewel. When the prince returned home, he would not eat any food. He grew thin and pale. Everyone around the palace tried his best to invent some dish which would tempt the prince's appetite. Finally, the little maid who took care of the hens said that she thought she could prepare a dish which the prince would eat. Accordingly, she made a dish of broth for the prince, and in the bottom of the dish she dropped the jewel which the prince had given her. When the broth was set before the prince, he was about to send it away untouched, just as he did everything else. But the sparkling jewel attracted his attention. "Who made this dish of broth?" he asked as soon as he could speak. "It was made by the little maid who minds the hens," replied his mother. "Send for the little maid to come to me at once," cried the prince. "I knew that the beautiful stranger at the festa looked like our little maid who minds the hens." The prince married Dionysia the very next day, and Dionysia was the very happiest girl in all the world, for from the first moment that she had seen the prince, she had known that he was the one above all others whom she wished to marry. Alas, in Dionysia's excitement, she forgot all about calling the name of her old playmate, Labismena, at the hour of her marriage, as she had promised to do. She thought of nothing but the prince. There was no escape for Labismena. She had to remain in the form of a sea serpent because of Dionysia's neglect. She had lost her chance to come out of the sea and become a lovely princess herself and find a charming prince of her own. For this reason, her sad moan is heard in the sea until this very day. Perhaps you have noticed it. You will often hear the call come from the sea as it breaks against the shore. Dionysia, Dionysia. No wonder that the sea moans. It is enough to make a sea serpent sad to be forgotten by the very person one has done most to help. The Yellow Ribbon, United States. Jane loved John, but she would never tell him why she always wore the yellow ribbon around her neck. John loved Jane. They lived next door to each other, and they went to first grade together. And John loved Jane very much. Jane wore a yellow ribbon around her neck every day. One day, John said, "Why do you wear the yellow ribbon?" "I can't tell," said Jane. But John kept asking. And finally, Jane said maybe she'd tell him later. The next year, they were in the second grade. One day, John asked again, "Why do you wear the yellow ribbon around your neck?" And Jane said maybe she'd tell him later. Time went by, and every once in a while, John asked Jane why she wore the yellow ribbon. But Jane never told. So time went by. John and Jane went through high school together. They loved each other very much. On graduation day, John asked Jane, please to tell him why she always wore the yellow ribbon around her neck. But Jane said there was no point in telling on graduation day, so she didn't tell. Time went by, and John and Jane became engaged. And finally, Jane said maybe she would tell him on their wedding day. The wedding day came, and John forgot to ask. But the next day, John asked Jane why she wore the yellow ribbon. Jane said, "Well, We are happily married, and we love each other. So what difference does it make?" So John let that pass, but he still did want to know. Time went by, and finally, on their golden anniversary, John asked again. And Jane said, "Since you have waited this long, you can wait a little longer." Finally, Jane was taken very ill, and when she was dying, John asked again, between sobs, "Please tell me why you wear the yellow ribbon around your neck." "All right," said Jane. "You can untie it." So, John untied the yellow ribbon, and Jane's head fell off. This story is classified as school folklore because children love to tell it. It always makes a hit told to a group in a dark Enid room. But it is not of school origin. It is the offspring of an old European folk motif, featuring the mysterious red thread around someone's neck. The mystery is solved when it is revealed that the thread marks the line at which he was once decapitated. Washington Irving used the motif in a story of the French Revolution, The Adventure of the German Student, in his Tales of a Traveler. The Little Scarved One, Canada. This is the Cinderella story as it is told by the Micmac Indians of Canada. In days long ago, a young Indian brave lived with his sister on the border of a lovely lake in the North Country. She took care of his lodge, which was the finest one in the whole region. He was tall and handsome, and all the Indian girls wished to marry him. He was guarded by a good spirit who had given him a magic arrow, so he caught more game than anyone else. The spirit also had made it possible for him to be invisible when he wished, to everyone but his sister and the girl who would someday come with the power to see him. This girl, he would know, was the one intended to be his wife. Toward evening, when the sun was low, the invisible one always returned home from hunting. His canoe came across the water, as lightly as a leaf in the breeze. Then his sister would walk down to the shore of the lake with any girl who might have come to the lodge that day in the hope of seeing him. To his sister, he was always visible. And as his canoe approached the shore, she would ask, "Do you see my brother?" Sometimes the girls would truthfully answer, "No." Oftener, the word would be, "Yes." Then the sister would say, "What is his shoulder strap made of?" There were only two things the Indians used in making shoulder straps: either a strip of rawhide or a green withe from an ash tree. Sometimes a girl would answer, "It's made of raw hide," or sometimes the withe of an ash tree. Knowing that her companion who said either of these things had not told the truth, the sister would reply quietly and kindly, "Come, let us return to the wigwam. Some of the girls would stay to help cook the supper. They would wait with great curiosity to see the hunter eat. There was proof enough that he was a real person, for his moccasins, as he took them off, at once became visible, and his sister would put them away. Beyond this, however, the girls could see nothing, though many of them remained all night. Try as hard as they could, no one but his sister had ever seen the young brave. Now, in a village at the extreme end of the lake, there lived an old Indian with his 3 daughters. The mother was dead, so there was no one to see that the youngest girl got her share of everything. The child's bright eyes were sad with care. Often tears ran down her cheeks as she went for water or gathered wood. She was a timid little thing, though very beautiful. Her sisters were jealous and hated her. They made her stay in a dark corner at the back of the lodge where no one could ever look at her. But she passed her time arranging beads and sewing them on her sister's clothes in patterns like the flowers of earth and the stars of heaven. When their father was away on his hunting trips, the 2 elder sisters were very cruel. They abused her in every way they could think of, and made her sweep up all the hot ashes. She was small and weak, and often ill, but this did not prevent them from treating her with great unkindness. Finally, her body was scarred, and her hair was singed, and the people in the village called her the Little Scarved One. When her father would return and see her burns, he would ask, "How did this happen, my little one?" But she was afraid of her sisters and dared not tell him. "Oh, it is all her own fault," the eldest sister would say. "We tell her not to go near the fire, but she always disobeys us and plays in the hot ashes. We can't keep her away." The Little Scarved One was very lonely. She would sit by the lake at night, longing for her mother to come back to her. She would sum to herself, 32 their luck at seeing the invisible one. They dressed themselves in their finest clothes, for they wished to look their best. On reaching the lodge, they found the young brave's sister at home, and at sunset, they went with her along the accustomed walk to the water's edge. When her brother approached in his canoe, she asked them if they saw him, and both answered, "Certainly." They lied like many others. One said the shoulder strap was made of rawhide, and the other said it was an ash withy. So they, too, had to return to the lodge without seeing him. But they stayed on and on, hoping to catch a glimpse of him while he was eating. They saw his game drop to the ground at the door. They saw his moccasins after he had taken them off. But when he ate, the food became invisible as soon as he touched it. So the 2 girls had to go home angry and disappointed. They were more cruel than ever to the little scarred one. The next morning, their father returned, bringing with him a great many pretty shells. The older sisters were soon busy. "Want my mother? I'm so lonesome." But her mother never came back. One day, it entered the heads of the two elder sisters to try stringing them, and the little girl begged for a few. The eldest refused, but the other one threw her a handful. The little scarred one knew where her sisters had been, and she thought dreamily, maybe I could see him. Then how many things might happen. But she had no pretty clothes. She was almost in rags. What could she do? The poor child had always gone barefoot, so she had to take a pair of her father's moccasins and put them in water to make them smaller and softer and easier to wear. Nearby, a silver birch stood, dressed in its beautiful white bark, and she thought, maybe my mother's spirit has entered the birch tree, for the Indians believed that every created thing had an indwelling spirit. She asked for just enough of the birch tree's covering to make a dress and leggings. She drew some figures on it by scraping and peeling the bark, and then made the dress. In this odd apparel, wearing her father's moccasins, and with a few strings of shells wound about her head, because she had no beautiful braids, the strange little creature went forth bravely to try her luck. For even the little scarred one wished to see the wondrous hunter in the great wigwam at the other end of the lake. Her sisters called after her jeeringly, come back, you silly little thing." As she passed through the village, the children and even the men and women laughed and hooted. Some of them said sadly, "Go back, little scarred one. It's no use." But she went on, for she had made a great resolve. Maybe it was the spirit in the birch tree that had inspired her. When the poor little girl in her clothing of bark, with her hair singed and her face scarred, reached the hunter's lodge, his sister received her most kindly, for she knew more than the mere outside of things as the world knows them. At sunset, the two girls went down to the shore. Off in the distance sounded the faint drip, 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 drip of the brothers' canoe paddle. He was coming. They stood shading their eyes from the flush of the sun as they gazed across the lake. At last the sister said, "Do you see him now?" "Him. He is wonderful." The little scarred one replied with awe, "Yes, truly I do see." "Then tell me what his shoulder strap is made of," the sister asked searchingly. "It is the rainbow," she said, and great fear came upon her. "But what is his bowstring?" asked the young hunter's sister. His bowstring is the Milky Way, the bridge of souls. Sweared the Little Scarred One. Truly you have seen him, said his sister. Now we must go back to the lodge and prepare for his coming. The two girls hurried home. The sister opened a chest of treasures, in which lay the most beautiful clothes the Little Scarred One had ever seen. Though at thought of herself, she hung her head in sorrow. But the sister bathed her in magic water, and a wonderful thing happened as the water touched her. All the scars vanished from her face and body. The sister combed her hair, and under the comb it grew long and shining, like a blackbird's wing. Her eyes shone like stars. In all the world there was no such beauty. The sister dressed the Little Scarred One in a wedding garment and adorned her with precious shells. She placed her in the wife's seat, which was next the door, and the two waited. At last they heard the game drop to the ground outside the lodge. The skins hanging at the doorway were drawn aside, and there stood the Invisible One, handsome and wonderful. He smiled down upon the Little Scarred One kindly and said, "So we have found each other." "Yes," she answered shyly and admiringly. In the blue cool of evening, as the sun was setting beneath the edge of the world and the red was turning to black, the Little Scarred One became the wife of the hunter. They were married under a silver birch tree just by speaking a word, as is the Dayan custom. The butterflies knew her and fluttered about. Flowers blossomed in the fragrant night air and greeted her with their scent-laden murmurs as she passed back into the wigwam.